What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here at GSD Studios. First off, thank you so much for checking out today's content. I'll make this extremely fast, but I need to plug our sponsors that make this show possible. Our first sponsor is PerfectStormNow.com, by far the most effective and affordable real estate agent website and database platform in the industry. It is the system I use to sell 50 plus homes every single month. Check it out at www.perfectstormnow.com. Our second sponsor is my personal 90-day mastery bootcamp, which is, again, my personal real estate agent mentorship program where we spend 90 days together, 12 live sessions. You get daily access to me inside the program. You guys, we go so extremely in-depth. There's nothing that's incomplete about this program. You're going to get all the tools that you need to go out there and crush it inside your real estate business. Make sure to go check us out, www.90daymastery.com. You can watch in-depth videos of exactly what's covered to see if the program is for you. See all the raving testimonials we have from all of the amazing agents and clients that went through the program. So make sure to check us out, www.90daymastery.com. All right, you guys, let's jump on into today's content. What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode interview. Every single week, we interview top entrepreneurs and just straight up top badasses out there dominating their space. These are people choosing to not live a life of mediocrity, but instead to go out there and create big, amazing, epic lives for themselves, their families, as well as have an impact on others. So another special guest on the show today, you guys. Our guest today is the founder of Luxmana Investments. Hopefully I didn't mispronounce that bad there. Investments LLC. So he oversees his personal assets as well as investor clients all over Colorado, Texas, Florida, Illinois. Started off as a part-time investor in 2004 and now has just built this massive operation. So really stoked and honored to have Mark Walker on the show, my friend.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Joshua. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, man. I mean, I'm excited to get into, because obviously we're a real estate podcast. I mean, entrepreneurship podcast, but very real estate heavy. And, so really excited to learn about what you're doing to create so much success in that end. But I always love guests like you too, because I know you didn't, you didn't start off with real estate being your passion. It kind of happened. You got to do it part-time, but you had a very lucrative, great job that a lot of people wouldn't have taken the risk to walk away from, but you made that decision like, hey, here's what I really want. Yes, it's a risk, but I'm going to take it and go after it. And so let's discuss that, man. I mean, what did you do before you got into real estate investments and what led you really onto this journey in the first place?
Well, you know what? When I was young, I guess we'll just start around the time I was in college, right? I mean, I couldn't wait to get out and get my first job, and back then what I aspired to be was I aspired to someday be the CEO of a large company. My major was in marketing in college, and I went to work for a large tech company called Seagate Technology. So anybody that has a hard disk drive in your computer or your consumer device or a server, whatever, you'll likely have a Seagate drive in there. And like I said, I someday envisioned myself someday being the executive vice president of sales and marketing, or someday being the CEO of a company like that. And then what happened is in 2003, I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? And, Joshua, we run into people all the time, I'm sure you do as well, that were incredibly inspired by that book, and it completely changed our lives, And in fact, probably 80% of the people that I know that got into real estate investing, that's where it started for them. And so that got me thinking differently, about money and about, creating some financial education for myself and, of course, real estate. So in 2004, I bought my very first rental property. It was in South Denver. It was a duplex. And it was a nice little deal. It had a 36.5% cash-on-cash return on the first year. And when you're getting that kind of return on your very first investment, trust me, that lights a fire under you like you just would not believe. All you can think about is doing more. Well, I owned that property for about a year or two and then sold it with the intent to 1031 exchange it. And a number of things went wrong. which we can talk about later if you'd like. So what ended up happening is I ended up sitting the next few years out. And it turned out to be a huge blessing in disguise because we all know what happened in real estate, 2007, 2008 timeframe. And then I started networking again and jumping back in 2010. And that's when I met a general contractor and we decided to do a couple scrapes together. When I say scrapes, I mean we literally bought a single family home in a real trendy part of Denver. We scraped that thing to the ground and we raised up a duplex in its place, and we sold off each side of that duplex. We deeded each side separately and sold it off. And that was kind of me breaking back into this real estate investing game, doing those types of development deals. Well, I always wanted to go back to what I considered my center, which was creating mailbox money, passive income. Yep. And that's when I started in 2011. I started Luxmana Investments and started buying rental properties again, and built a modest-sized portfolio in the Denver area, which by, the end of 2014, I'm still working at Seagate at this point. And but I think the game changer for me was I started looking around at how much my real estate business was taking off, and frankly, how quickly I was able to make business decisions with the help of like my accountant, my lender, my insurance agent, my property manager. And then I'd see how quickly those types of decisions would bear fruit. And then I'd compare that to work in the corporate world, where everyone has the power to say no, but no one has the power to say yes. And so I started getting really, really frustrated. And I just decided, it's time. I have enough passive income here that I can step away from my corporate job and be fine and just continue to invest my time and passion into real estate. And that's kind of the gist of it. And it was actually after I left that high-paying job that I actually broke into the multifamily space. And, that same year that I left, I ended up taking down a 64-unit apartment complex. And, it's just been exciting. I've definitely always felt that, whatever I put in to my business, I get out, several fold more. It's been great.
Yeah, love it. So just out of curiosity, because most people when they're in college, they're thinking about getting a good job, but they're not thinking about becoming the man, the CEO, right? And it sounds like maybe that drive came before even college. Like, how did you get instilled that drive? Have you always been, even like in your younger, years as, a kid? Were you always driven, or were your parents really driven? What instilled that drive in you initially, do you think?
Gosh, I don't know. Maybe I was just too stupid to know better. Frankly, I was just that kid that just, had big ideas, and, I don't know, maybe nobody told me no, or you can't do that, or maybe they did and I just didn't listen. I probably had a little bit of stupid in there, but, I think it was just a passion and desire. It was a desire to be free. And do what I want with my time, and not be told what to do. And I think that, obviously, back then, before I knew anything about, being an entrepreneur or, my greatest idea what that looked like was, well, I'll just be the top guy. I'll just be the CEO, but then as I learned more and I learned what freedom really meant, what it really meant to be free, that obviously that my thinking evolved, and I no longer, I couldn't tell you when, but it was, some years later, some point between, call it 2004 and, 2010, that I really just completely lost that desire to be that top guy and just really, started, focusing on becoming financially free.
Yeah.
And, that's it. I've never looked back. It's been great.
Yep.
The truth is too, that a CEO, when you really think about it, a CEO, especially for a large corporation, they work for the board of directors. No matter how high you go in a corporate environment, you're still working for somebody else.
Yep.
And I even used to look up to a lot of the, executive vice presidents and stuff like that I worked for and stuff like that. But the truth is, they were just somebody else's got to get it done guy. They had to answer to somebody else. There was always some kind of urgency or whatever that drove their priorities and forced them to do what they had to do. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. So then you jump in 2004 and you talked about that first deal that you did. And again, it sounded like a blessing. You sold it, and you were going to re-jump in the market. But yeah, with that hyperinflation followed by that massive crash, I'm sure it was a lot of frustration at the time, but became that massive blessing. What went wrong in that transaction?
Sure.
What was it with the 1031, or what ended up leading to the blessing that happened?
Oh boy, this is a good one. This is a really good one, Joshua. So 2004, I bought the property, and I don't have the exact dates in my head, but about a year or two later, I sold that property, put the money into a 1031 exchange. And the reason I did that was because I'd come to know this company in the Denver area that had this, what looked like a really cool business model, right? They were a builder, and they would build these duplex products. They'd build a whole community of duplexes, and then they'd sell each of the individual duplexes off to investors. And it was really neat because they put it in there with finishes that were designed to be kind of rental type finishes, very marketable product. Then they had a property management division. They also had a division that specialized in non-owner occupied financing, and they also had a division that did 1031 exchange intermediaries. Well, of course, I put the money in with their intermediary division. Well, long story short, I ended up testifying to the grand jury to help get the indictment against these guys for fraud. The whole thing was sour from the top down. I was the second guy they put on the stand at the official trial, and the lead guy was sentenced 130 years in Colorado. It was the largest prison sentence ever divvied out at the time in the state of Colorado for fraud. And, what can I say? I mean, I was affected. I lost some money. Fortunately, I didn't lose any more money than I could afford to lose. Secondly, I was fortunately not in a category of some people that had gone even further with these guys and actually even taken out construction loans and stuff like that they turned around and embezzled. So it could have been a lot worse. But, I took away a very valuable lesson, and I call it my PhD in real estate. And that is whenever you're looking to do any kind of business with anybody, you've got to vet them. You've got to do due diligence on them as well. And if I had done better due diligence, I believe I never would have gone down that path. But that was the big takeaway for me. And like I said, I came out of it, and I came out of it stronger. And obviously, it's I've made all that money back, plus so much more, since all that happened. So and it did make me afraid. The short term implication of that was I was scared after that. So, every deal I looked at for the next couple of years, I just talked myself out of buying because I was afraid. Well, then that was good, because the market crashed, and then I started buying again, jumped back in the game around 2010, 2011. So
yeah. Now after going through that experience, did it turn you off somewhat to a point where you're like, just, man, screw this. I'm going to get out of the real estate space. It isn't for me. And then, you just, as years passed, you just kind of redevelop that passion. Is that what kind of kept you away for that, like 6 years before you got really back into it big? Or was it just the timing?
Yeah, it was really the fear that you're describing, and thinking to myself, boy, I don't know that I want to do this again, but I couldn't even tell you either what helped me get over the hump. Maybe it was just time. My wife was very supportive, during that time. I mean, I remember getting the phone call one night, telling me that the company had gone into receivership, when all this stuff started going down. And I basically pulled into the garage and had to go inside and tell my wife I just lost, that this money was most likely gone. She was very supportive during the time. And even when I decided to jump back in the game, she was very supportive, then as well. So, but when I did jump back in, I definitely vetted, like for example, that general contractor that I worked with to, build some properties. We vetted each other really well before we went down that road, and so, it was just something that happened, and, I just kind of brushed myself off and jumped back in.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, those painful moments they're tough to go through, but they can, if we allow it to be so, become our greatest assets. And sounds like that was the case for you. So then, okay, you jump back in 2010, and in a very quick time, you start having success. You're taking down a 64 unit apartment complex. And I talk with real estate investors that takes them 20 or 30 years to get to that level, and you're out there doing it in a couple years. So kind of walk us through how it goes from doing a couple, scrapes, if you will, to being able to go out there and take down, such a big property like that.
Yeah. Well, I've always been a big believer in systems, and building business systems. Any entrepreneur, I think, that can, put systems and processes and, create formulas for success, they're going to scale, much more quickly, than somebody else that's maybe just flying by the seat of their pants, every single day. So when I started buying the rental properties, I really just honed in on, on my niche, and I was buying a lot of stuff in Denver, single family stuff. I was targeting specific areas. I was targeting specific unit types, and most importantly, I had a tool that I was using that I created for evaluating the property. And it's crazy to even hear myself say this, because it's amazing how much stuff can change in just a few years. I wouldn't even touch a property back then that did not demonstrate a 20% or greater cash on cash return in the first year.
Yeah.
And those deals are just almost impossible to find. In fact, I'm going to go as far to say, well, yeah, they are impossible to find right now. The market is definitely a seller's market right now. But those were, you could find those, relatively easy back then, 5 years or so ago. And so I even think about the properties that I turned my nose up at. I mean, literally, if I don't think about the properties I bought, I think about the properties I didn't buy back then. Yeah. I mean, there were ones that, I did like a short sale or, something like that. And the bank would come back and approve a price that caused the cash on cash return projection to only be like 19.6% in the first year. And I said, forget it. I'm
now you'd be
bailing on that one, and, I should have totally, done those deals, but I guess the point is, back then I had a system and I had acquisition criteria, and I stuck to it, man. I had a formula for success. And, I had people out there that were looking for the very specific things that I were looking for and bringing me those types of deals. And, I had my lender was all lined up, everything was all lined up to take those deals down quickly, and even being able to take them down as quickly as I could was an incentive for, some sellers. Other stuff I was able to get at foreclosure auction or, other methods as well. But, I was just positioning myself to move quickly, and I had a formula of success that I just repeated over and over and over again. And there was a point where obviously the market changed, and, that formula, I couldn't take it any further. Like I said, 20% cash on cash return deals just, don't really exist out there, at least where I was employing that, formula for success. So, but, I just repeated it as many times as I could until it just didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And then what happened is how I scaled into the, larger apartment deals. And this is an example of where, kind of everything you do, kind of prepares you for the next step, or the next level, going to the next level. When you jump into the larger multifamily space, there's really three pillars or things that you need to think about. These are the things that a lender is going to look at, that they want to see in you as a guarantor or a sponsor in order to approve you through their underwriting. The rest of the underwriting that the bank does is going to depend on the property. That's one of the things I love about commercial and multifamily, is that the lender looks to the property to cover the debt service. In single family, a bank is oftentimes looking to you and your job to cover the debt service, right? But when you get into multifamily, there's three things that they're going to look at in relation to you. One is your experience. And this is not scientific, but I'm going to say that that's probably 50% or more of the decision right there is your experience. They want to see that you have owned these types of properties, or that you have experience in renovating properties, operating them, and successfully exiting from them. The second thing is your net worth. They want to see your net worth be equal to or greater than the loan amount typically. And then the third thing is they want you to have enough post-close liquidity to carry the property and mortgage payments for 12 months, assuming that the income of the property is zero. Okay, so it's really balance sheet type stuff and experience that they're looking at. And so, when I jumped into that 64 unit, I had some experience. I had bought a 12 unit apartment complex in Denver, a smaller deal. And I just kind of, I had the experience and was able to demonstrate that I plus I had the net worth, and I had the financial strength because of the other properties that I owned, and operated to satisfy the lender's requirements. And so, those are the three pillars that if you want to scale up and do bigger deals, those are the three pillars I'd focus on.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Love it. So then, with that being said, to get to that point, because I think so many people, most of those that are watching and listening to this are we got a lot of realtors, real estate investors, but a lot of real estate agents, right? And I think most real estate agents' dream is to really become an investor so they can become their own client, right? But a lot of people, I don't know if it's discipline or what it comes down to, but they're not willing to make those life choices to be able to develop the resources, to be able to even get started in this for those down payments and whatever. Kind of talk to us, because, you'll see these mega, investors, super successful investors, and maybe, now they have a nice house and nice vehicles, whatever, but it didn't start out that way, right? Like, what was initial budgeting like, even from the corporate world transition to this, and then also as you're building this, so you can keep growing, those assets? What was your budgeting like, or maybe even still like today, to be able to set yourself up for this success?
Sure. I think that's a great question. And I think really, what I'd like to bring up as part of that is the, kind of the mindset that you need to be prepared for. If you someday aspire to escape the rat race per se, and live off your passive income, then there's a little bit of a mental battle that's going to occur. I was prepared from a budgeting standpoint. I wouldn't say I was fully prepared in that mental state. Yeah. So when the time did come, it was the end of 2014 when I decided to leave the corporate job, and I officially did it in January 2015. And it was literally a conversation with my wife where we sat down and we said, okay, we're going to make this transition. And yes, we've got good passive income from the rental property portfolio and the investments and stuff like that. We obviously looked at all of that, but let's face it, I had a very high paying corporate job. And fortunately we've never been the type to like live high off the hog per se. But there were some things that we did unplug on. Like, for example, we unplugged our cable, our cable television, and some of those things like that. To be honest with you, we never even turned it back on. I'm better off not having that crap. I don't watch as much TV, and I am instead I'm focused on family and health and things like that. But yeah, there were some things that we said, just to be safe. We had strong liquidity and stuff like that. Just to be safe, let's be smart about this, and let's let's budget for that. So you got to do that, right? You got to know your numbers, and all of that. But, I'll just tell you, we easily had, I had 2x cash flow, than I did expenses. So that was good, but I will tell you, I gave up a really nice corporate salary for sure.
Yeah.
Now, kind of along those lines, when you go to do this, you need to prepare yourself mentally, because for the prior 14 years, I'd worked for a corporation for almost 14 years, and my mind had been trained for 14 years to know every 2 weeks, man, money was just going to magically appear in my bank account. I mean, it was just ACH'd right in there, just like most of our paychecks are, and didn't even have to think about it, didn't have to go cash a check or anything. It just magically appeared there, and whether I did a good job that week or I did a bad job, it would just magically showed up, man.
Yeah.
And so it was like crack for the brain, I just, breaking that took a good 6 to 12 months of kind of coming off of that high, and no longer seeing that money magically appear in my bank account, even though I was fine, even though we had passive income and stuff like that. It took 6 to 12 months to come to grips with that. So that's something you're going to have to think about, and just, again, know your numbers, be prepared for it. And it never hurts to scale down. And to this day, I drive a Nissan Sentra.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time in my life when that kind of stuff was more important to me, but man, I'm free, and nothing beats that. And so, it changes your perspective in that sense as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. So, it's like you said, with the mindset, because it is crazy how much it messes with you. The whole keeping up with the Joneses game, or we play these delusional games like, oh, we deserve it, and our ego gets in the way. And I had a mentor of mine years ago that he told me, he's like, the difference between me and you, and I'm like, what? And he goes, I'm actually rich, and you're trying to prove to the world that you're rich. And I'm like, all right,
yeah, it's true,
point taken. Because I was a high income earner, but I was spending it. I was. And then he said from there, he's like, get to the point where you're only living off of 20% of your income, right? So then you can invest 40%, have the other 40% set aside for
right.
Taxes. And he goes, that's how you create true wealth. And it was so ungodly tough. And like you said, most of it was the ego and the mindset, to get to that point.
Right.
Love it. So then from there, what then, because you're in Colorado, you're doing a lot of this, you're building up your own portfolio. What then transitions you into going into other states and then opening this up where, hey, I'm not just going to manage my own portfolios, I'm going to manage other people's portfolios as well. Like how does all that transition happen?
Sure. Part of it, like, for example, when I left the corporate job, one of the ways that I cracked into the multifamily space too is I was very fortunate to have a cousin that has done multifamily for almost 30 years. And he's very active in Texas. He had done some stuff in Colorado. He has a corporate office in Colorado. He moved up to Colorado probably around the 2011, 2012 timeframe. And, he said when one day he called me up, it was late 2014, and he said, how are things going? Just checking in on you. And we'd always get together and we'd talk about real estate. I'd tell him what I was doing with single family. He'd tell me what he's doing with multifamily and stuff. And, this time when he called me, he said, how you doing? I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and make the transition. I'm going to leave the corporate job. And, without even thinking about it, he just said, hey, if you want, you can come, sit in my office and job shadow me and learn multifamily if you want. And that was a huge opportunity for me. I took him up on it because, it was multifamily, and the way these transactions go down are completely different than the residential space. And so I had a mentor, to help me as well through that, to scale up and take the next steps. And, he played a key role in that, and so, that's also too how I ended up doing something in Texas. I got into Illinois, for example, by buying some tax liens and stuff like that in Illinois that I ended up, foreclosing on some properties and stuff like that. And where I ended up doing asset management was actually in the multifamily space. I actually have 2 equity partners that are involved in the 64 unit. And, so that's kind of how I got into the asset management space and stuff like that. So, but I definitely, I'll tell you, I definitely enjoy my own investments the most.
Yeah.
Just because, I get to keep, all of that, but, that is the majority of what I do. It's just on the larger deals, I go out and I brought passive investors in on those types of deals as well. So that's what's nice too, is once you have scaled up and you do larger deals and you've demonstrated that you can operate those kinds of properties and successfully turn a profit on them, the floodgates are wide open. The only limitation is how much equity you can come up with to close the next deal. Right. Yep. That's really your only limitation. So that's kind of why you have to go, if you want to do really big deals, you have to go into the asset management space and be able to raise money from other investors and stuff like that. So,
yeah, love it. So then when it comes to multi-units, because I think that most of our listeners probably understand the power of those compared to a single family detached. Single family detached could be a great way to start whatever, but you've got one door. Somebody vacates, so there's, I think most understand the power of the multi-unit deals. But I think there's a lot of fear of the unknown. And like you said, it's a totally different beast. So with your experience, what would you say are like the few biggest mistakes that you see real estate investors, when they get into multifamily, that you see them commonly making that makes it where it's not a successful, deal for them?
Right. Yeah. One of the biggest mistakes I see is them going in undercapitalized. Okay. And one thing I'm going to say here, and I mean absolutely no offense, right? Because I'm technically licensed as well, right? I went ahead and got licensed in 2015. Okay. And I know you're one of the top realtors in the whole nation. So but brokers lie.
Right.
Okay. You gotta keep that in mind, right? In the sense that when they're marketing a property, they're going to give you a set of expenses and stuff like that. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make too is they don't validate those numbers. They don't do their due diligence. They just take those numbers at face value. They don't go off and ask themselves, what would it cost me to operate the property? They just figure, well, this is what they're currently paying for utilities. This is what they're currently paying for property management and all of that. They don't go back and rebuild the P&L on their own. And so they go in undercapitalized. They think, oh, well, this is just going to be a turnkey type deal. That problem becomes even bigger if, in order to justify the rents that they're saying that you can get post-close, it's very common to see properties advertised that, rents are way below market. Well, they're probably below market for a reason. Yeah. They're probably below market because the units have not been renovated in several years. And compared to the properties that are around it, that are getting higher rents, they're just trashed out units, for lack of better words, right? So in order to get those rents, you're going to have to make a CapEx investment, right? You're going to have to invest some money. And people sometimes just think, well, every deal's turnkey. No, it's not. In order to unlock higher rents or higher income, you're going to have to make an investment oftentimes. Or you might have some secret sauce that allows you to operate that property, for less than somebody else, right? So you've got to validate those numbers and make sure that you're going in really, really well capitalized. That's one of the big mistakes that I see. Some of the other mistakes too, kind of along those lines too. And I made this mistake. Fortunately, it wasn't a very big one, but I did make this mistake with the 64 unit is, engage the city before you close as part of your due diligence. Know what, when you get into like the larger commercial space or even apartments and stuff like that, the city suddenly has more of an opinion about your curb appeal, about, like, for example, safety, what they consider safety issues and stuff like that could exist with the pool and stuff like that. They're going to, in Texas, for example, anytime the property trades hands, they reissue a CO. You've got to get the CO all over again. So they're going to come out, they're going to do an inspection, and they're going to give you a list of things that you have to fix. And you have to fix that within 30 days. And there was one surprise I had with my pool. I had the property inspected. The pool looked fine. It was, it was in good condition and stuff like that. So I didn't budget anything for the pool. The city came out to inspect and told me that I needed to, replaster the pool. Well, that would have been maybe a $6,000 event. But of course, once you start peeling back the onion, one thing leads to another. That turned into about a $15,000 event, all because the city wanted me to replaster the pool. I had not considered that, right? So know the city, partner with the city, be prepared to make that property everything that it can be, and some places can be great for that the city's going to be proud of, and you are going to be proud of as well. That also plays into, not going into a deal undercapitalized as well.
Now, is that something now that you do, like during your due diligence phase? Let's say you've got 30 days worth of due diligence for inspection. I mean, is that something now at the city where you're just on top of day one to make sure that, because I'm sure a lot of this stuff you're able to potentially, get the seller to do some of this stuff as well then?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely engage the city. I talk with the compliance, people at the city to understand, maybe what they've observed at that property in prior inspections, or, when possible, I try to get, inspection reports and stuff like that, whether it be out of the seller or out of the city, just to get a general sense of what they're looking for at that property and what they might nail you for. And you want to make sure you just have it rolled up into your CapEx budget.
Yep. Love it. So, and then when you talk about being undercapitalized, you talked about, kind of reverse engineering that P&L to make sure that everything lines up, or at least you know what you're prepared for at that point. But what should people prepare for, right? Because I think that, a lot of times they might be prepared for, hey, if there's a vacancy rate, but, is there a percentage of the overall cost of the unit or the rents that you should have emergency funds for? Because there's unexpected things like, sure, a storm comes in and puts a hole in the roof and boom, how do you personally prepare to make sure that you always have enough capitalization, where it's not that big of a risk for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's actually two things that I do. One of them is voluntary. One of them is kind of involuntary, but they're both good. One thing that I do is I usually put a minimum of 10%, sometimes 20, into the CapEx budget, just for unexpected things. Deferred maintenance type things. Whatever. So that's always a good practice. And, I'll typically gauge that, whether it's 10 or 20% will kind of be gauged on how heavy of a lift that property is going to be. If I'm observing a lot of deferred maintenance and stuff like that when I'm doing the due diligence, it's going to be 20%. If I'm looking at a property that overall looks like there's little to no deferred maintenance, that most of what I'm going to be investing in is going to be, things that are going to drive rents, that's what you really want to spend your CapEx on, things that's going to drive rents. You don't want to be addressing deferred maintenance. But if I'm in those types of situations, it'll usually be closer to 10% because, something's going to happen. It's inevitable, right? That's the voluntary piece. The involuntary piece is actually still pretty good, depending on what kind of financing you get. Like, for example, if you get agency debt on it, those are the really attractive non-recourse loans and stuff like that you can get. Those guys are oftentimes going to require you to put aside some replacement reserves or CapEx reserves. So literally what they'll do is they'll hire a third party to come out as part of their due diligence, separate from yours, and do a inspection of the property. And they'll actually look at the property, and based on their observation, they'll say, okay, well, we think the ACs have this much, this many years left and useful life. We think that, the appliances overall, here's their useful life and things like that. And they'll literally say then, okay, if those need to be replaced in year 10, then they'll say, then they'll basically add that all up, and they'll basically, divide by 10 years or, however many months or 120 months. And they'll say, that's how much we want you to put aside every single month as part of your mortgage payment in replacement reserves. And then when those types of items come up, like let's say you replace an AC condenser unit or something like that, you're allowed to draw against those replacement reserves. They're escrowed for you. Yeah. So that's also a way that the lender protects themselves as well from the property essentially becoming dilapidated and stuff like that, because they want you to maintain it so it remains a good, solid, strong asset. Protecting their collateral, essentially, right? So that's involuntary, but that's good. I actually like to do that because it's just good financial discipline. To put that additional money aside every single month to have something to draw on for those unexpected things. Or in that case, sometimes they might be expected, but that way, see, that's another common mistake that I see. Is that I see a lot of owners that just strip the property of all of its cash every single month. And again, it goes along with being well capitalized, right? They take all the money from the property and they leave a very little bit amount in the operating account, and they do a distribution for the rest, and you got to remember your number one priority is the property. You got to protect the asset. That asset it's that concept, right? Do you want to work for money, or do you want your money to work for you?
Yeah.
And if you want your money to work for you, you've got to maintain and protect that asset. It's your number one priority. Your investors are a close second, and you and your investors are a close second. But your number one priority is taking care of the property.
Yep. Love it. So then, with you personally, because you're at a position now where you've got a large portfolio, you've got, a lot of money coming in, and it's been said that good becomes the worst enemy to greatness for a lot of people, right? Because you can get caught up where life's good enough. Things are really good. You could just be like, hey, I'm just kind of done, and I'm just going to go out and enjoy the rest of, like what keeps you personally not settling for good enough and continuing to grow this and continuing trying to strive for that greatness?
Yeah, I love your questions, Joshua, because you're hitting on things that I think about a lot, especially right now where we're in this seller's market right now. I've made offers on properties, I've gotten the highest and best and stuff like that, but I haven't won any deals recently, right? And so it's not a very good market environment for a yield hog investor like me, right? And so. But I'll tell you what keeps me going too is, my family. When I started out in 2017, and I was setting my goals, the top two goals that I set is I said, I'm going to focus on family and health. Those are the two most important things. I lost 30 pounds. Okay.
Wow,
since the beginning of the year. And, at the same time too, even that focus on health has been something that's kind of brought my wife and I together, something we can do and focus on together. And, we share that priority. But I have a 5-year-old daughter, and you have, I think, 3 kids as well.
Yep.
What that's like, you just want the best for your family. And, so yeah, I do enjoy my freedom. At the same time, I'm always thinking about what's next. And, so I do think about that a lot. I'm constantly underwriting deals, looking for the next deal, but I'm not desperate enough to make a bad deal, So, when the right deal comes along, I know exactly what it's going to look like, and when it does, I'll strike. And, if it doesn't for a while, then it's good to be in a position where I'm not desperate for a deal.
Yep. Yeah, no, I love it. Cause yeah, I mean, markets always repeat themselves, right? There's always
Right.
corrections. So it's who knows when that's going to be, a couple years, or who knows when, but
Right.
you've got yourself in a position where, when we see another 2007, 2008, 2009, you're ready to go out there and strike while it's hot, right?
Right. Right.
So
Exactly.
yeah, love it. So what do you, I mean, what do you see yourself taking this? I mean, do you, as far as an overall company, I mean, is this something that you want to keep expanding into other states with? Like where do you see yourself and your company being in, I don't know, next 20 years or so?
Yeah, I think if I was to take it into additional states and stuff like that, I have looked at that. I could maybe, take on one more market before I'd have to clone myself. So yeah, I'd love to take it that way. I just want to make sure it's smart growth.
Yeah.
The numbers need to make sense. And usually when I think about whether or not to go into another market and stuff like that, I even look at things like, what's the average price of a plane ticket, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, Frontier Airlines flies back and forth between Denver and Dallas. There have been times in the last year that I have literally flown round trip. I usually go in same day. I go in first flight in the morning and I come back the last flight of the day. There have been times my round trip airfare was less than my airport parking by the time I got back that night. It's crazy. I mean, I would even look at things like that, and stuff like that. But anyway, back to your question, Joshua. Yeah, I'd love to continue to scale it out. Obviously, I feel like that's really difficult to do in this kind of market. But you're right. There will be a cycle to this, and when it does, then yeah, I'll be well positioned to take the next step. I've even got a bunch of people that have indicated that they would love to bring some equity to a future deal. But again, I'm not desperate for a deal. I have very strict acquisition criteria, and when something fits that mold, we'll continue to scale up. In the meantime, it's just, I think the big challenge is you got to be disciplined in this type of market to recognize, whether or not a deal is going to make sense for you. There is a lot of pressure, right now for investors because they all feel this urgency, like they've got to get into the game. They get on these podcasts and they listen to, guys like us. Right. And you feel this pressure to do something, and which is true. You've got to have urgency. You've got to be prepared and ready to strike, but not at the cost of doing a bad deal. So
yeah, like you said, I mean the urgency, but then those watching and listening. I mean, if you look at Mark's career thus far, it's also been 13 years in the making, right? So many people want to create what you've created, but it's like, look, it's not a marathon, or it's not a sprint. It's a little bit of a marathon here.
It is.
Right? So,
it is.
And I love that you brought up, the thing of the plane ticket, because some might hear that and be like, man, that's intense. That's like, you're obsessed. But show me one person that's ever achieved greatness that hasn't been obsessed, right? If you don't obsess over the numbers and the criteria, and that's,
it's true.
Why you've been able to continue to duplicate and create all the success. So I love it. So, if those watching and listening want to reach out to you, get a hold of you, learn more about you. I know you also just published a free report that you mentioned that you wanted to give away as a gift. Kind of walk us through that. Where's the best place to do that? And tell us about that free report that you just put out.
Sure. Yeah. You know what? If you'd like to connect with me or to see what I'm all about, check me out on luxmana.com. That's www.luxmana.com. And if you go to /GSD Mode, then there is a white paper I've recently purchased written that you can check out. It's called 10 Not So Obvious Ways to Boost Your Multifamily Property NOI. And one of the things I love about multifamily is that these types of commercial properties are valued based on their income. And so it's really simple formula. You increase income, you decrease expenses, the value of your property is going to go up, right? It becomes very predictable. And there's some less than obvious ways to do that, more than just raising rents and stuff like that. So I've written this paper. I'd love to give it to the listeners as a free gift, as a way of saying thank you for listening to me ramble for a little while. And again, you can get that at luxmana.com/GSD mode. And also from there, there's ways to, connect with me on LinkedIn and stuff like that as well. So.
Awesome. So wherever you guys are at, whether it's on YouTube, the website, iTunes, Stitcher, we'll make sure I have links right below where you can just click on the link and check that website out, get that report right away, and be able to follow Mark and learn more from Mark. So just a couple last questions. I know we're getting long on time, but knowing everything you know now today, right? If you could go back and give yourself like 2 pieces of advice, let's say back in 2004, or, right when you graduated college, or whenever that time frame may be that you would want to. But again, knowing everything you know now, if you could go back and give yourself 2 pieces of advice to your younger self that you feel would have really just created this success, like just at a more exponential rate or a faster rate, what would those 2 pieces of advice look like?
Yeah, I think seek out a mentor. Is one thing. And that could be, that could be an official coach if that's your thing. Or it could just be, someone that you come across or that you observe that, has the life that you'd like to mimic, right? Humble yourself enough to know that you don't know everything, right? And you can benefit from, hearing how other people have done and the mistakes that they've made and stuff like that. That's number one. I'd say the second thing is know your acquisition criteria. But like I said, I do think about the properties that I didn't buy, back then. I'd say in addition to knowing your acquisition criteria, also know the market really well. I think that back then the market was, in a state where I think we were all afraid, we were seeing the bottom fall out and stuff like that. And it seemed like the world was soon going to stop spinning. But, to a more savvy investor, based on what I know today, right, and now I know how to recognize that type of market, I might have taken, a lot of those 19.6% cash on cash return deals, realizing that, there's a market aspect to this as well. Obviously that doesn't apply today. We're in a very strong seller's market right now. But back then, having that context, I probably would have taken some of those other deals as well. So.
Yeah, love it. Powerful stuff. And speaking of the mentor and the coaching, I know with publishing some of these reports like you're doing, I mean, you're giving back and you're doing a lot to help other investors out. I mean, do you see that in your future of going into like almost creating a mentorship program of some sort for other real estate investors?
I definitely have thought about that. It's something that I haven't really gotten very serious about. I've had people reach out to me, several times and inquire about that, but it's just something that, right now, I haven't, made a very high priority and stuff like that. Yeah. But I do, blog occasionally, on my website. I do these interviews, and I also, have like that paper, for example, so that because I do enjoy helping people, and people did help me along the way, right? And so, I do feel, that obligation to help out others as well, that aspire to do similar things. So, it's a great business. And, I've always said too, never stop learning. Learning leads to action. Action leads to success, right? So as you learn, you have to also put it into practice, right? And if you never take any action, you're never going to see any success. So, but yeah, I enjoy helping people, but I have not kicked off an official coaching program or, education series or anything like that. So
Yep. Love it. So those that are watching, listen, I know I end every podcast with this, but information without implementation truly is just the start of delusion. Information is no longer power. It's taking action on that information that creates power inside your world so you can create the life you know you want and deserve. And Mark shared so many amazing pieces of advice with you guys today. Make sure you take something that you learn, take massive action on it so you can go out there and create the life you know you want and truly deserve. And again, below in the comment section, in the show notes will be links to get that free report, links to connect with Mark, learn more about Mark. So make sure that you take action in doing that. And Mark, I know how busy you are, man, and it's truly an honor to have you take time out of your busy to be here. This has been a lot of fun.
Hey, this has been fun, and thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real honor.
Yep, 100%, my friend. All right, you guys. Well, thank you again for watching and listening. We will see you next time.